So the last time I posted a video on selling your artwork at Comic-Cons was back in 2019, and I made a few predictions on what I thought the future held for the industry, where things were going, and wow, little did I know where we were headed. Greetings everyone, welcome to the underground lair where we bring our creations to life. I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs. I'm a professional illustrator, designer, and mad creator because, let's face it, we all have to be a little crazy to do this thing called art. Speaking of crazy, last year was a little crazy with the state of the world and everything being put on pause. Large-scale gatherings, particularly Comic-Cons, definitely affected by that. But it seems like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Things are starting to open back up and you're seeing Comic-Con slowly start to come back. So the question I'm getting from a few people, and something I'm kind of curious about, is it time to start going back to conventions as exhibitors, selling our artwork? And if so, what's the best way to do that? Because things have changed quite a bit. So as I said last time I did a video like this, I made a few predictions. I am not going to do that this time because who knows what's going to happen. But I do have some opinions and some thoughts. You can take those with a grain of salt. I really don't know. We are definitely in uncharted territory on where things are going to go, how things are going to bounce back. It's very early, and I am not going to profess to know what's going to happen down the road. Now, I do have experience doing cons and things like that, so I'm going to share some of the experience and things that I've learned all the way. But keep in mind, everything can change because this is a brand new world that we're in right now. So with that being said, I just want to get into it. If you are considering exhibiting at Comic-Cons, once again, some things that may help you out. So cons are back, sort of. Just this past weekend, San Diego Comic-Con ran their second Comic-Con at home, where it was all online and everything. They opted to push the reopening of Comic-Con back into November, where they're going to do sort of a soft opening, what they're calling a special edition. It will be their first live event coming back, but it's going to be on a smaller scale. We'll have to keep our eye on what's going on with there, because they kind of set the trend for a lot of, I mean, that's who everyone is looking up to, what San Diego Comic-Con's doing and what's happening with them. A lot of changes obvious over the past year, and even before that with some of the larger studios like Walt Disney, Warner Brothers kind of pulling away, not launching that much stuff at Comic-Con, and opting to, do their own specific conventions. For, Disney's got their, was it D20 or D12? I think D20 is the dice. I think it's D12 or something. I don't know where the 12 comes from. But anyway, that they got their own convention and everything. So things are changing even before, the whole situation that we've been in the past year in 2020. So yes, many people are looking to San Diego to see what's going to happen with them, where they go, and that can probably inform what happens in a lot of other spaces. Although there are other conventions that aren't waiting to see, they're kind of jumping out there. So we'll see what happens with them too, as sort of, maybe those are the canaries in the coal mines. I don't know, we'll see. Maybe it's smarter for San Diego to kind of wait and see what's happening and let these other conventions test the water before they do it. So maybe it's a good business decision. As far as me, I'm not really, as much as I do enjoy San Diego Comic-Con, it's been a while since I've been there and I haven't ever exhibited there. I'm an independent creator, and not that there aren't independent creators there. I know a few that are doing really well. They've been on the waiting list and they're already in there. Whereas if San Diego isn't just a convention that you can just jump into. You've got to sit on that waiting list for, it's almost like a rent-controlled apartment or something like that, where if you're in there, it's great, but if you're not, well, you're kind of out of luck. But there are all kinds of other opportunities out there, and that is sort of why I pulled away. If you watch my last video, the last video I did on comic conventions was me basically saying I'm done with Comic-Cons, and this is even before 2020. So I cashed out. I said, you know what, I'm not going to re-up. I'm done with Comic-Cons, as much as there's things that I enjoyed about them, but I just saw them going in a direction that really wasn't working for me personally, so I opted out. Intentional or not, it was probably one of the best decisions that I made. I didn't know what was going to happen, and obviously it's horrible, and for whatever reason I backed out at the right time. Whereas if I didn't, I would either have to be trying to get a refund, or I'd be know, my money be put away, because basically, usually after you end a convention, you know, you take a portion, or some people, if it's not a very good convention, you take everything you made and you put it back into there. So I take a portion. I always took a hefty sum of what I brought in and just dumped it back in for the next year to secure that space. And I just said, you know what, I'm out. And like I said, it worked out for me. But I don't know if it was just me, because I interviewed a few creators in the last video that I did, people that have been doing cons for a while, and sort of the trends that they were seeing. Basically, they were seeing just a lot of con fatigue, oversaturation of the market, just all these comic conventions, you know, popping up, the shift to definitely focusing more on celebrity-based, you know, events to draw people in, and in turn, that's what most people were going to Comic Cons, were for the celebrities, and with celebrities charging hefty sums for those autographs. I mean, people have a limited budget typically when they go to a Comic Con. So I started seeing my profits sort of dwindle in this downtrend, and you know, and like I said, talking to some other independent creators, they were sort of the same opinion. So I was seeing declining sales pretty much for the last 3 years, and that's not what you want to see. When you're doing these cons, you want to see an uptick. Well, actually, I mean, I guess it was a little up and down. It wasn't just declining, but the last year did decline a little, and it just, I just saw the writing on the wall, or I thought I saw the writing on the wall, because like I said, I could have never predicted, you know, the situation the world would be in and everything like that. So needless to say, that has all changed, and so with that in mind, you know, knowing that what I had predicted is totally didn't happen, at least it wasn't allowed to happen. Maybe it would have if we lived in an alternate reality where we never had a global pandemic or anything like that. So, but anyway, so that didn't happen. It's something different happened, which changed the game, changed everything. So having said that, am I reconsidering what I was thinking about? No, not so much. So the landscape has changed, whereas before there were just conventions popping up all over the place. You couldn't, you know, book a convention without having to make a decision. Well, should I do this one or should I do this one? They're on the same weekend. I don't know, but they're just all over the place. But you know, now, you know, post-pandemic and everything, there are a lot of conventions that couldn't weather the storm, that aren't going to be coming back. So, you know, it's, and other ones are going to come back slowly. Some that maybe were going to launch, maybe decided maybe this isn't a good thing. And there are other people, either conventions that maybe shifted to online and did better that way. I know as an artist, that was sort of my goal, was, you know what, I think, you know, spending all this time with the booth set up and all this weeks in advance, sure, it was profitable when I calculated the amount of time I was spending for prep and all that stuff. And then I really looked at all of that. Then I was like, you know what? I just don't know if it's worth it for the amount of time I'm putting in. And that's the way I went about it. There's different ways, and we're going to get into some tips and things, some advice that I would, you know, that I'm going to give to you, so you guys can figure out if cons are going to be good for you, using some of the mistakes and some of the things that I learned in the past. So we'll definitely get into those. But I said to myself, you know what? I think if I focus on digital sales, online sales, I think I could do better than I am at these Comic Cons, and I did, and I have been. And I think a lot of other artists who may have gone to cons and everything, once that wasn't available to them, it's like, okay, what do I do now? I got to figure something else out. And they did, and now maybe that's working for them, and now they maybe aren't like so apt to jump back into cons, even if things were in a perfect scenario, which I think that rollout's going to be a little slow. There are going to be some people that are a little hesitant to going back to cons. So that's all on the audience and everything. So whether what the attendance we're going to see at these shows, I'm not sure. If you have rolled out, I haven't looked at any attendance numbers or anything. I've seen a few videos, and it looked a little sparse from some of the videos I've seen. I don't know the scale of some of the cons that I was looking at, but we're just going to have to see what those look like. But in any case, things are different now. And you know, it may be a good time. Maybe as bad as it's, I'm just putting a silver lining on a bad event is what I'm saying here. But maybe with what happened and with things kind of scaling down, maybe it's getting a little, maybe things will get a little more back to grassroots. Maybe people will, conventions will focus a little more, you know, smaller conventions might start to pop up again, focusing a little more on comic art, or not necessarily just comic art, but artists in general, and not just big celebrities and things like that. So we're gonna have to see what happens, but I'm sure the reason why you clicked on this video is because you're considering maybe doing cons again. And so I've got a few tips, some things that I learned along the way that I want to give to you guys, and hopefully it's going to help you out. Keep in mind, new territory, we don't really know what's going to be going on, but these are some tried and true things and just some things that I've learned that I think might help you out. If you are even considering, you know, banging around that idea of going back and exhibiting at cons and selling your artwork at cons, things like that. So let's get into some of these tips. So tip number one is keep it simple. Focus on one thing that the attendees can easily digest, that they can easily understand and know what you're all about, because you only have a second to grab somebody's attention. You are competing with so much other stuff, all these bright lights and theoretical bright lights, but just all of these different images and everything that are all over the place, and people are just walking down those booths, and you need something that's going to catch their eye, that you're going to be like, whoa, what is this? This is interesting. I want to know more about this. And I speak from experience because I may have gone about this the wrong way. My booth, I went with the whole mad scientist vibe, and you know, I was doing all original artwork. I didn't do any fan art and everything, so I was starting off as a disadvantage because people didn't know any of my characters, anything that I was selling, and I got better and better as I went, and finally I think I got it down to a science, so to speak. But by that time the writing was on the wall as to where Comic-Cons were kind of headed and everything. But in the beginning, you know, I just went with these elaborate setups and everything because I came from the world of like trade shows and things. I used to produce a kids television show, and we went to shop that to networks and everything. We went to this event called NatP, which was where everyone buys and sells TV shows, and it's like a two-scale thing. You've got the big players, the NBC. This you know, this is back in the days when it was mostly network TV. Well, there's cable too, but not streaming or anything. But anyway, so you've got all these big players, and they had all these elaborate setups and everything. They're up on the top floor, and then the bottom, the smaller guys, they just basically had the standard trade show booths, very blocky, just boring. And we went there with this display that looked like it was carved out of rock, and it was just all this kind of like a jungle theme, and it just stood out because it stood out from everything else. The problem is that these cons, you're more like you'd be up at that upper level with all the big guys, because there's so much stuff out there that if you get too elaborate, maybe too colorful, who knows, it's just gonna get lost in the sea of all of this, you know, really colorful stuff. So eventually it just took me taking things back down to more black and white. I'm sure my artwork was very colorful, but it was framed with a lot of black around it, just to kind of, you know, dial everything in, and that's why I say keep it simple, because, and that's everything from, I mean, when I first started off, I had these big, I mean, I was lugging out these big signage and things that I made out of foam, and it wasn't compact, and I would have to make all these trips, and it would take forever to set up, and it was cool, but it just got lost in that sea of everything else. So eventually I started simplifying, making everything collapsible, so I can, you know, all my displays came apart and they could be held flat, so I could just take a couple trips and find ways to easily set everything up. I went through like all this, like everything with Velcro. I could just, you know, pop my prints up there, and I just found a system that worked. And if you want to see that old display, it's in the video that I talked about last time about me quitting cons, and with some of those interviews and everything in there. But, you know, like I said, just whatever you can do to simplify things, make something that people just can understand. Don't go too crazy. If you're doing fan art, do something, you know, you got to niche down. Find whatever fan art you're doing, you have to do it in a way, some way that no one else is doing it. Find a unique take on those characters or whatever, because otherwise there's going to be other artists doing that, and what's going to separate your stuff from everyone else? I've seen people do, you know, whatever fan art, whatever IP that they're, you know, piggybacking off of, you know, do it with just unique media. Whatever the case is, if you've got a particularly interesting style,
style. But if you are, then stick to that style. Don't just go all over the place, because I know with my mad science supplies, I had everything. I mean, from, you know, I had little like different lab experiment products. I had my prints. I had, you know, buttons and pins and all this other stuff, and it was all a little different from each other. So not that you can't bring different products to sell. You know, you can have buttons and smaller prints and larger prints, all that stuff, but you want to have that style be consistent, so people know immediately what it is, because you don't have time to explain what all this stuff is, because people are just passing by just really quickly. So just keep it simple. Tip number 2 is know your brand and know what you're selling, because everything you create should have a story behind it. Because when somebody does stop and you do have their captive attention, you're going to have to explain what this is, and you created it, so there should be a story behind it. I mean, like, what inspired you to create this? Why are these? Is this a favorite character of yours? Is this your own creation? What's the idea behind this creation? Where did you get the idea from? All that stuff. People are really interested, and that's what creates that connection that makes them want, like, oh, this is kind of cool. I mean, sure, there's some things that are just like, oh, I like Deadpool, I'm gonna buy Deadpool, whatever. But if you got your own stuff, or if you're doing a little different take, there's definitely a story behind that. That's why I said make your stuff stand out, something that's different. That's gonna generate that attention, and then go on from there. Explain a little more about, you know, what's behind this creation, this thing that you created, and why it's interesting to people. Because that's what really, honestly, a lot of people maybe on the fence looking at something, when they hear that story, they're like, oh man, then they just get into it. You know, it's a pitch. You should have a different pitch. You should know how to pitch each one of your particular products. Every single one of your prints should have a story behind it, something that you can grasp onto and just rattle off like it's nothing. If you have to practice at home a little bit, you can do that. But it shouldn't be too hard, because like I said, you create it. You typically, unless you're just creating things just because, oh, I know this print's gonna sell because it's got some famous character on it, and you really have no attachment to that. And that's how some people do it, and some people do make decent money doing it that way. But for me, if I'm gonna create something, it has to be something I care about. So I care about it enough that I can relate to other people why I care about it, and why maybe they should care about it as well. And knowing what you're selling, knowing your brand, also means knowing how to display your artwork. I mean, you should definitely be displaying stuff flat and vertical, so, or for any angle. So however somebody approaches your desk, because different people have different, like, buying habits. Like, some people kind of walk through the con and they're looking up. Some people are looking down, like they don't want to make eye contact, but when they're looking down, they can see the stuff that's flat on your table. So different people approach, you know, buying or just going through a con different ways. So you want to have that best advantage, where no matter what way somebody is going through that con, you're going to attract their attention. So the last con I did, I think I mastered this, where I had my branding, my signage, the Serkworks Art Labs on basically any way you look at my booth, other than on the back, because that's definitely, you don't want to put stuff on the back, because, you know, that's conflicting with the people behind you, and you don't want to cause any confusion with the branding of your stuff. But if you're in the aisle that I'm in, if you're coming down this aisle, I'll have a sign, you know, facing this way where you can see it, and another sign on the other end of the booth, and then I'll have another one here. I have stuff flat on my desk. So and then of course on the if you got a print wall or whatever. So no matter what you're looking at, you know, it's just all over where it says, you know, Serkworks Art Labs, Mad Science Supply. So, and again, white on black, very, you know, the only thing colorful is the actual product that I was doing. So when you go through, you're seeing that Serkworks Art Labs, Mad Science Supply Company. So you get that like right away, no matter what angle. Also, you know, because you're relating these stories to people, you've got your stuff all set up. You don't always know what people are looking at, because when somebody's at your table, they may be talking about one thing, and if it's facing away from you towards the audience, towards the attendee, you may not even know what they're talking about unless you've memorized where every single little piece of your artwork is. So one thing that I do is I'll put like little post-it notes on the back that says what each thing is, so when they're looking at something and I can't see it, I know what they're talking about. Then I can go into my pitch for that particular product, and I can hype it up and do all that stuff. So just some little tips about, you know, setting up branding. I can go really in depth with this, but I want to keep this a fairly short video, so maybe we'll do more, we'll see. But that's the second tip, just knowing your branding, knowing what you're selling. Tip number 3, don't undersell yourself. Know your production costs. how much time did you put into something? There's so many costs involved that sometimes we don't even think about. We think we go to the convention, we make table, we make more than table, and we're not even taking into consideration all the money and the time that we spend into creating what we're creating. So you definitely want to keep that stuff in mind. I mean, there's travel fees, there's booth fees, there's the taxes, the parking, all that stuff. Like I said, not to mention the time that it took you to create things. Every little thing from, if you're printing your own stuff, the printer cartridges, sometimes printing stuff at home with those cartridges, as expensive they are, sometimes it's cheaper just to outsource that printing. That's what I started doing. I started going to CATPRINT, and I mean, I could get my prints down to, for 12 by 18 was the size that I was doing, and I get those down to around $1. I could sell those for like $20 in some cases, and then still having some leeway if I need to bundle some things together and everything like that. So as a general rule of thumb, you want to, at the very least, you want to triple your costs. So whatever it costs you to produce that artwork, you want to be able to make 3 times that back. Maybe more. Like I said, that CATPRINT with the prints, those, if I sold prints, and towards the end of cons, that's another thing that started to shift, is that prints were not selling, and that was the sort of the biggest money maker, because there was just so much profit margin built into that. But with prints starting to dwindle off, looking at other things, sometimes you can make up for that in the prints, because there was a bigger, you can make more than that 3 times profit from a print, but some of the other stuff you couldn't. But generally, if I'm looking at a product that I'm going to put out there, I want to make sure that I can at least make 3 times, because honestly, all the other stuff, you got to factor that into it, and that kind of helps bring that together, because you can say, oh, okay, I'm making at least 3 times what I paid for something, so that makes that my investment of time in that, it makes it a little, it evens things out a little bit. And when you're selling artwork at a con, you should have a variety of different price points. Not everyone has the same budget, so I typically, I think the lowest thing I had was maybe like a $5 item, maybe a set of buttons or something like that. When I started, I was even doing dollar buttons, and it's going to add up and everything, but I kind of shifted to a pack of buttons. So the lowest thing on my table was $5, and definitely you want to keep everything at dollar increments. You don't want to do like $5.25. That gets hard to add up. So keep it dollar increments, but I go 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, and then it doesn't hurt to have at least 1 or 2 big items, like a $200 item, or a $300 item. You may not sell that, but you never know. I brought a couple canvas prints of some of my artwork, and I sold those, and that's a nice little boost, because there was definitely a pretty big profit built into that. So yeah, maybe a few higher price points. And the thing that does also, when they see these higher ones, there is some psychology in this, where if you have an item that's more expensive, and people are like, oh, that's a lot, but I really like that, but oh, this one here, this one's only $40, where the other one's $200. I think I could spend for $40, where if you didn't have that one, then maybe somebody look at that $40 one and goes, that's $40, I don't know if I can afford it, maybe I get the $20 one. So so that's something to think about. Also, and that sometimes that does work, but also it might be a good idea to have different products at different sizes, because if somebody can get your $20 print up here for $20, if you've got a postcard that's $5, they may opt for that. So you may not want to put the same artwork on the postcards. So I had different postcard artwork or smaller items than I did for those bigger ones. Once you get up in that $20 range, it seems like, even if I sell something for $40, it's still about the same profit margin. I mean, from what I'm paying for that item to the next one, if that makes any sense. The last thing in regards to selling that I want to mention is to sell the sizzle, not the steak. So it's not always the item that you're selling. Sometimes, like I said, it's the story behind it, or sometimes there's a way to take something kind of just average that everyone else might have and add something to it, packaged in a different way that kind of gives you that advantage. So a perfect example of this was, there's a lot of people out there selling shirts, t-shirts at Comic-Cons Cons. There was one company that had the license for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is officially a licensed product. So that in of itself, I mean, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that's pretty cool, but to separate themselves from all the other people that may have been doing like bootlegs or just other people selling licensed turtle shirts, one thing they did differently was to package it. And this was a limited run t-shirt, only so many of them, but they packaged it in like this exclusive pizza box that they screen printed and everything with their, you know, the company logo and everything, because everyone knows that pizza is synonymous with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So that was just a brilliant marketing you know, strategy to get people a little bit more interested. And you could do that with other things as well, as long as you don't conflict this with my other rule, which was keep it simple. So just keep that in mind and kind of find a nice middle ground for that. And that brings me to the last tip that I want to share with you, and that is just to enjoy yourself. You know, if this is your first time exhibiting a con, or you're returning after that last hiatus that we had, this is all brand new. We really don't know the state of cons, where things are going to go. So let's look at this as, you know, sort of a learning experience, an opportunity to kind of just, like I said, just enjoy ourselves. And just like if it is your first time, then yeah, but if it's not your first time, it kind of is in a way, because the rules have all changed. So, you know, if I was going back to Comic-Cons, not saying I am, but if I was, I would do things quite a bit differently than I had before in the past. And in saying that, you know, like I said, you're there, enjoy yourself. I see so many artists at cons who maybe it's not going well for them, or maybe, you know, they're a little bit introverted, which that's definitely me too. I found ways to kind of break out of that, and that's something I suggest that you do to get a little bit out of your comfort zone, even to little by little, because you're at a con, you've got to interact with people, and you're talking about your artwork, you're talking about something that's personal to you, so you should be able to at least get excitement about that. But nevertheless, I see artists, they've got their heads down, they're either working on their sketches or in their phone, and just people are passing by and they're waiting for somebody to make that connection with them. All you have to do is just stand up and look at people while they're walking by and make contact. Just smile, just enjoy yourself, because, you know, some people are going to look at people like, oh yeah, I mean, that's sort of a turnoff for, you know, I know for me, if there's just a person it just doesn't look like, you know, they're enjoying themselves, I don't really want to interact with them. So just stand up, smile. If somebody walks by, ask how's the con going for you, or anything like that. Just simple little interactions. You never know, that could draw somebody in, and then you know, go into what you're doing, and or don't, or just talk about, like I said, ask them how they're going. Maybe they volunteer that information. You never know how these conversations start, but it definitely doesn't start by having your head down in your phone or in your sketching. I know a lot of people, that's how they make their money, doing sketches at cons, and that is a way you can go about it. I'm not big on sketches because it's like it's a one-time transaction. You spend a lot of time doing this one thing, and if you can sell for a decent amount of money, that's good, but something you can print and sell over and over again, you know, like prints or other products, that's probably the way to go at cons for me. But nevertheless, a lot of people do commissions, some big names, and they do pretty well. But if you are going to be doing your commissions at the show, then you know, look up from your table every once in a while. It's not that hard to do, and just kind of interact with people, and maybe that way when you go back, and maybe they'll kind of look, oh, what's he working on, after you already made that eye contact. So yeah, enjoy yourself. And if for some reason you aren't enjoying yourself, things just aren't going very well for you, kind of try to keep that to yourself as best you can. Don't go telling other people, like if somebody comes by your table and asks how it's going, don't go, oh, it's horrible, blah blah blah. I mean, you don't want to badmouth the convention and all that stuff, at least not at the convention. I mean, there's a place for critiques and things like that, and maybe ways for them to improve their, you know, the convention or whatever, talking to other people and be a little more proactive. But don't talk about that stuff at the convention. I hate to say lie, but, you know, just put a positive spin on it. Ah, not too bad, not too bad. How are you? You know, don't just like, ah, this is horrible and it's the worst thing, because that person may have been having a good experience up until then, and then it's like, oh man, you know. So, you know, definitely try to look at from a you know, a positive perspective, and just go into it. And the thing is, when you go into a convention, especially if you're just starting out, one of the rules, I heard this when they're talking about cryptocurrency. If you're going to invest in cryptocurrency, don't invest any money that you aren't okay to lose. And that's kind of the same with gambling or anything like that. But it's kind of, I think that's the way to approach, at least for your first year. Obviously, the goal is to make money, and the goal is to make a living off your art at these conventions. But if you're just starting off, especially after the year that we have with things opening up and us really not knowing what's happening, if you're going to invest some money into this con, just do it knowing, oh, I'm doing this for the experiment. This is me investing in what I'm doing to kind of get a feel for it. And if I don't make enough sales to cover table, or to make more than table, or whatever, then I'm okay with that. I'm just going to enjoy myself, just so we can get an idea of where things are headed and everything. So I think that's definitely a good way to approach going back to cons. Just have that positive outlook and enjoy yourself. So those are some tips and advice that hopefully is helpful to you. As for me, I don't know if I'll go back to doing cons right away. I've been talking to some friends that are doing it, and they're asking if I want to share a table. In some ways it seems weird to kind of go backwards, whereas before I had this big booth and everything. But I don't know, I might just start over, because if I do go back to a con, I may just do like I was talking before, just go to enjoy myself, just to hang out with a friend. Even if it's a half a table, I might just go with my how to make comics workbooks. I've got tons of these things, and just see how those do. And just that would be the only thing, because one of the things I've never really figured out, that plus my comic book, because they kind of go hand in hand, but just the books, not all of the other prints and all that stuff. And it probably won't, I probably won't earn as much money if I end up going that route. But the one thing that it'll kind of show me is that, because before when I was talking about that sensory overload with all this stuff, that was kind of my problem with my booth, is that I had my comics in there, but with all the other stuff, some people more gravitate to the prints, sometimes the lab experiments, all the other stuff that I was selling, and it didn't really give me a chance to really talk about the comic or see what that interest was one-on-one. Like I do, I do these store signings now, where that's pretty much what I do, is I've got my books there, and I see that connection there a little more. So I may be curious to see what that is, how that happens at a convention. But I don't know, it's not like a priority of mine. It might be something I want to do just to try out, just to see, just to get back to doing cons and kind of see what that's all about. But I don't know, that's me. What about you? If you clicked on this, chances are you're maybe interested in exhibiting at Comic-Con. So hopefully this stuff was helpful. And I don't know if you've got any questions. I've done plenty of cons. I've got plenty of advice that I didn't necessarily give here, because I don't want to make this a huge long video. If you want more of this kind of content, let me know. Or if there's some other content that you want to know, that you want to see on this channel, let me know. Other than that, I will see you guys later, and that is all.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.